You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. Yeah, it's a mouthful. For more great shows like the one you're about to enjoy, visit electronicmediacollective.com. And now, our feature presentation.
Hello, and welcome to the Middle Age Movie Reviews Podcast. Two guys saying Joey is up in a tree, and he said he won't come down until you agree to play this podcast for the masses. My name is Tim, and my podcasting partner is...
Matt.
Tonight, joining us for the first time from Classics with Courtney YouTube channel, it's Courtney. Say hello, Courtney.
Oh, glad to be here. I am super excited to talk about this movie with you guys.
All right. Also joining us tonight, a man who likes to sing the song of cinema, the DungeonMasterElite YouTube channel, it's Rick. Say hello, Rick.
What's going on, everyone? It's great to be back, and as always, have a fun time with you guys. So thanks for inviting once again.
All right. Well, Rick, why don't you tell us what picture show we are seeing tonight?
All right. So tonight we're watching the 1962 movie To Kill a Mockingbird, which is number 405 from the book of 1,000 Movies You Should Watch Before You Die. This one was written by Harper Lee and Horton Foote, directed by Robert Mulligan, and starring Gregory Peck, John Megna, and Frank Overton.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rick. So, fellow carbon-based humanoids, when was the first time you've watched To Kill a Mockingbird? And I'm going to throw it over to you first, Courtney, since you picked out this movie for us to watch this fine evening. When was the first time you saw this movie?
So I believe I was about 17 or so. I was at my local library, and I happened to pick up a copy, and I actually watched it with my mom, who was very familiar with both the film and the book. She said she loved both, and she actually said she had a massive crush on Gregory Peck in the film. So I watched it with my mom, and it was actually the very first movie as a young adult that made me cry. I think the only film that made me cry at that time was Where the Red Fern Grows, and that's not a movie I really want to watch again. But To Kill a Mockingbird was the very first movie where I actually cried, and I loved the story. I thought it was so powerful, and I bought it very shortly after that.
Nice. Excellent. All right. Well, how about you, Rick? When was the first time you saw To Kill a Mockingbird?
So I was really thinking about this leading up to it and while I was watching this, because I was like, yo, man, I had thought that I watched this when I was talking with you guys a few weeks ago. And then as soon as I turned the sucker on, I was like, no. I definitely watched this one before, and I read the book. This was something I actually did. I can't remember if it was junior high or high school, but I read this thing with our language arts in whether it was high school or junior high, I can't remember. And then afterwards, we watched the movie. So it's been a long time. But I did kind of remember a few things from, the experience from before, which is kind of cool.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing both your guys' perspectives as we move forward through this. Tim, how about you? When was the first time you seen To Kill a Mockingbird?
This is actually my first time of ever viewing the film. So I tried to read the book before, made it partway through, got bored, gave it up, moved on. So never read the book fully, and first time watching it from end to end.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear your fresh perspective to it. And you know what? I'm right there with you, Tim, because it seems like so far, these last couple episodes, this is the first time I viewed this movie. I was a little shocked considering that it's such a classic film, and it's a complete white space for me. I've never seen the movie. I was supposed to read the book in junior high, but the teacher never assigned it for our reading assignment, even when we had the course syllabus at the beginning. She's like, yeah, we're not doing that book. I don't know why. Maybe because I had a cold, heartless, middle-aged teacher. I'm not sure. But yeah. So that brings us to the synopsis. So Tim, since you're our official puppeteer for our podcast, and you kind of give us a direction as to where you want to hear the synopsis, why don't you lay it on me? Tell me how you want to hear the synopsis tonight.
All right, man. I've made it real easy for you. All I would like you to do this evening is make us feel like we're in 1932, old-timey Macomb, Alabama, and read it with your best Southern accent as a Southern gentleman.
Do I have to do a Southern gentleman, or can I do a Southern lady?
Hey, yeah, you
right on
pick
my
it, I guess.
I do declare. I do declare.
Go for it.
All right, here we go. In a small town in Alabama, 1932, Atticus Finch was a lawyer and a widower. He has 2 young children, Jim and Scout. Atticus Finch is currently defending Tom Robinson, a black man accused of raping a white woman. Meanwhile, Jim and Scout are intrigued by their neighbors, the Radleys. In particular, oh my pearls, the mysterious, seldom seen Boo Radley. Thank you very much.
All right, Matt, that was both well done and disturbing all at the same time. So congratulations
Thank you.
and well done.
Oscar nom.
All right. Well, before we dive into the story beats, and since this is Courtney's first time on our podcast, I figured I'd throw a few questions to you, Courtney. So, what got you interested in To Kill a Mockingbird?
So I believe around the time that I watched this movie, I was on the lookout for classic films because this was when my passion for older films was really starting to really take place, and I was watching a lot of classics I had never watched before. And like I said, I don't remember what caught my eye when it came to Kill a Mockingbird. I just remember that my mom had said, oh my gosh, Courtney, that's a great story. The book is great. The movie's great. I, too, tried to read the book. Actually, I think I did finish it, but I really wasn't a fan. But I just loved the film. But yeah, I think that's basically how it came about. I think it was more my mom that actually encouraged that idea because she's like, she'd already seen it. She had a crush on the actor. So I thought, okay. And I actually grown up with some classic movies growing up. So black and white movies didn't bother me. But I really liked the story and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, then in that case, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the story beats. So we'll start right off the bat here. So after a rather interesting stylized opening credit sequence, the camera descends upon the languid small south town of Macomb, Alabama. An adult version of Scout narrates the film's events, which are told from 6-year-old Scout's point of view in the early 1930s, at the peak of the Great Depression. The adult Scout briefly recalls her upbringing in Macomb, remarking, "The day in Macomb was 24 hours long, but it seemed longer." Oh, wait, I got to give it true justice. Hold on. "The day was 24 hours long, but it seemed longer. There was no hurry, for there was nowhere to go and nothing to buy, and no money to buy it with." Although Macomb County had recently been told that it had nothing to fear but fear itself. The famous speech by, I just had his name, oh man, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That summer she was 6 years old. So then we see a poor farmer, Walter Cunningham, deliver a crook sack full of hickory nuts to one of the town's defense lawyers and Scout's father, Atticus, as part of the entailment of Atticus's legal work. After an ashamed and embarrassed Walter leaves, Scout inquires about her family's economic status and how they compare to the Cunningham's family. Atticus tells Scott that they are poor, but not as poor as the Cunninghams, whose livelihoods were shaken by the Depression. Now, I did think it was interesting that right off the bat, we kind of get the establishment that we're right in the middle of the Depression, and we're right in the middle of the South, and we kind of see a little of that social economical thing happening right there with the lawyer and the farmer, Mr. Cunningham. So I'm going to turn it over to you first, Rick. What did you think of this whole opening sequence?
So, I mean, the very beginning intro, I thought that was pretty interesting because it kind of showed this like old cigar box, you know what I'm saying, with these little knickknacks and stuff, and it kind of like got me thinking like, what's this all about, kind of thing. But when the music actually chimed in, it gave this like real homely, kind of pleasant kind of atmosphere to the whole thing, and the music really kind of helped out make it seem like, especially with the title, maybe could give a different kind of intonation as far as how the story is going to go. But in this particular case, I thought that it was actually did a pretty good job to keep the emotions going a certain direction, and then when it got to that exposition to where you're actually starting to see what's the what's the backdrop for the different events that are going to come into play down along the line in the story. I thought that was pretty cool, and they I mean, honestly, I had to rewind it a couple times when they started to talk about the things that were going on during this time period, because I was like, wait a second, what time period does this actually take place, again? Because I had completely forgot. I thought when I heard them the first time, I thought they were talking like Great Depression and stuff, and I was like, okay, well, is this true? Certainly it is. So for someone who's watching this, like, years later, I mean, we're getting to when the story took place. We're getting close to 100 years after when the story actually took place. So I thought that was pretty cool to like, kind of get the impression about, where we're at in time with regard to this story. So I think it holds up really well, despite being significantly older in cinema. You know, is what I'm saying? So,
I get you. I know what you're saying.
So yeah.
How about you, Courtney? What did you think of this whole opening sequence?
Well, like our buddy just said, it's unique, definitely. For me, I think what really popped out was the music. Elmer Bernstein, who composed the music for this movie, is one of my favorite composers. And I think that's one of the biggest draws of the film is that music. And it's like once everything starts out, the music is very light, very whimsical almost. But then when that powerful sound becomes bigger and more emotional, I think it really draws you in, and you're in for a really emotional experience. And I really do like the whole kid with the crayon and the opening and stuff. Ironically, that was used very recently for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I think for season 3, which I thought was actually very interesting.
I've never seen The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Is it set in the same time period?
Actually, it's set in the late 50s, early 60s.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. How about you, Tim? What did you think of the opening sequence to Kill a Mockingbird?
I think what probably sets this movie apart from a lot of other ones during this time period is that we're in the Great Depression. It's just happened. 1929, doesn't end until 1939. We're about 3 years in now. But what do most of us remember from that time? Or, not that we were there, but what's the images we've seen? We've seen the people in the cities, the people jumping from the windows, the long bread lines in the cities and things like that. This takes us away from those images that we've all seen, puts us into rural America, the farmers who are doing everything that they can to keep their farms. There's no money. There's no place to go. There's nothing to buy. It's just you maintain your house with whatever you can find. The kids have to play with whatever they can. I mean, it's tires and sticks, and if they got find enough lumber, they maybe could build a fort like they do, in this movie. But I think the cigar box that we see with the trinkets in it really sends that message home. That's the kid's toy box. That's it. There's some pennies in there, a few crayons, not many, broken different sizes, a broken fountain pen, a broken pocket watch, a whole bunch of stuff in there. That's the treasures of youth. I mean, there's no money for toys. There's, it's just whatever you can figure out to do with yourself. And a lot of times what they're doing, they're acting out like plays and stuff, and they're giving parts to each other, things like that. This is how they're entertaining themselves. It's a really interesting look. And I think a lot of us can't even fathom. I mean, we've been through some recessions, but we've never seen a depression. And like I said, what I remember as a kid is just those images from the cities, never really even thinking about what the farmers had to go through. So when you see, one of Atticus's clients paying him in nuts. I mean, that's it. That is payment. That's what the guy has. And so does he have some money? Yes. Does he have a lot? Comparatively to them, he's on the lower end of poor. I mean, obviously he's doing better than everybody else, but a lot of his payments aren't cash. It's in whatever somebody can find, whatever they can hunt, grow, gather, or chop down and bring to them, whether it's firewood or corn or potatoes or nuts or a rabbit or whatever. That's how he's getting paid. So it's very, very interesting. And we see that throughout the film as we go along. There's different scenes where you see the disparity between the people, them and the people around them, the homes around them, and the children, and how they're just acting, or what they have, and what he's able to do for certain characters as they go along. So I think it's a real good insight into that time period.
Nice. I couldn't say it better. The one thing that I was kind of curious though is, do you think this would be a good way to get back to the barter system? You know?
I'm pretty sure it's not good. That was the barter system. I mean, that's what it really was. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, and what I did think was kind of neat was you had mentioned the cigar box, and of course that shows up later on in the film, and I just thought it was neat that it ties back. If you were paying attention to the opening sequence, you see the cigar box later on with the exact items that Jim pulls out of it, which we'll get to later on. So moving down into the film a little further, we've got in that same scene, Jim, Scout's older brother, looks down from a treehouse and spots a young boy crouching among the plants. The young boy soon introduced himself to Scott and Jim as Charles Baker Dill Harris, who is visiting his aunt, one of Finch's neighbors, Mrs. Stephanie Crawford, for 2 weeks in Maycomb. Dill is eccentric and acts beyond his years, but he and Scout and Jim become fast friends and spend their summer days playing games, hanging out in the treehouse, and fantasizing about the nearby house which harbors Macomb's pariah, Arthur Boo Radley. Equally terrified and intrigued by the creaky Radley house, the three children believe in the gossip story that a cruel Mr. Radley locked up his mentally unstable and troublesome son, Boo, after Boo supposedly stabbed him in the legs with the scissors. Now, I gotta say, I was watching this with my wife, and when Dill showed up on the screen, the first thing she said to him is, "That kid needs braces." And I'm like, yes, he does look a little weird, hon, but you got to remember, this is set in the 1930s. I'm pretty sure orthodontic dentistry back then wasn't really all that great. But I'm just kind of curious what you guys thought of Dill and just the kids playing in general. Personally, I thought it was neat when they got in that tire and they decided to go rolling down the street in a tire. I thought, hey, I wouldn't mind going out and grabbing the tractor tire and doing that. But I'll throw it over to you first, Courtney. What did you think of the sequence with Dill and the kids playing?
Well, I definitely agree with you. Every time they're playing in the tire, I think that is such a simple little game, but yet that looks like so much fun. And honestly, Dill is so fun to watch. I usually mock or repeat the line where his aunt comes up behind him and scares him, and he goes, "My Lord, Aunt Stephanie, you almost gave me a heart attack." I get a kick at how he enunciates that line and stuff, but I thought that they all had really good chemistry together. I think it also shows once Jem joins in the group, although you get the sense that Jem and Scout are close as siblings can get at that age, I think once Dill comes into the picture, Jem, I think, gravitates to him a little bit more because he's a little boy just like Jem is. So whenever Scout doesn't want to do something that they don't want to do, Jem's like, well, just go away then because Dill and I are going to do this. So I actually thought it was an interesting perspective to show how different they all were to each other, and yet they still hung out together.
Interesting. Well, Tim, you're an older brother and you have a little sister. Growing up, did you see a similar situation like Dill Harris and Jim?
No, actually, there's such a great age gap, more like a Grand Canyon gap between me and my sister, that we did not hang out at all when we were that age. So there was never her trying to hang out with me and my friends. We were just way too old for her at that point. But there was a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and we actually lived in the country, or I shouldn't say. We were the last bastion of civilization before it turned into corn and beans. Like, literally, my street had houses, and the other side of my street had corn and beans. That's just where it started. And there was one farmhouse down the street that was the don't go down there because it's haunted house kind of thing. There had been a couple deaths down there, so that was always the house we talked about. And
was it Boo Radley's house?
There. It was. It might have been. I mean, it was. I remember kids would break in there all the time and take little things out, little prizes that they find, skeleton keys, things like that. I actually found a tombstone in the yard, like seen it kind of sticking up and dug it out. And there was an actual tombstone buried in the yard that I found in there one time and stuff. It's just creepy, just a creepy place. The farmer had come to a bad end. A combine had caught his scarf. He got caught up in the combine and it killed him. So like all kinds of just, it was the perfect house to scare the hell out of children. And although we were a little better off than these kids were, money wise and stuff. But we never pushed each other around in a tire. But we did rip apart a dryer at one point and put one of the people in the drum that we pulled out of it and rolled him down it. Not as fun because you got those little ribs that like move the dryer stuff around and bruise the hell out of you. So there was only about 2 or 3 pushes on that, and they were like, "This is no longer fun. It's just painful," and we quit. But so I kind of lived a little bit of the country life, but not quite where they are at with it.
Well, what's your take then on the kids in the movie and how they were playing?
I mean, again, it's what you would expect. I mean, they played with whatever they could find. I mean, the tire thing makes total sense. I mean, yeah, let's put each other and roll them down the tire. And I mean, usually your goal is not just to roll them in the tire, but to push them so long that who's going to throw it first. I mean, that was, when you're around with a bunch of guys, that's the game you play. Who can we get to bar first? I mean, kind of thing. We go down to the creek and stuff and play there. They didn't have one, but you played with whatever was, within your walking range and things like that. But yeah, I think it's pretty good. And I think I find it interesting that the bond that we see between Scout and Jem on screen seems, it really does seem true when those two children had never met each other. And the funniest part is in real life, they lived about 4 blocks away from each other. Until they were on set, they had never met each other before. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I think the director, I think Lee did, or not Lee, but Foot did it. Not even Foot. I'm sorry. Let's try again. Mulligan. I think he did a good job, filming the kids, because it's hard. I mean, it's hard to film children. And my understanding is that he got to the point where you realize multiple takes is not the way to go. Most of the time, whatever the first take was, that's the take he's using because it was the most genuine, as the kids would just get bored and start going off in tangents or just not doing their lines right or whatever because their attention span is so short, which ours was back then too. So I think he did a good job of capturing the kids as kids.
Gotcha. So directing kids is like working with Joey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So very much so like working with Joey. Yeah.
It's so easy to pick on him when he's not here. I really shouldn't.
Well, that's his fault for being up in a tree.
Yeah. All right. How about you, Rick? What was your thoughts on Dill Harris and the kids?
So, watching this stuff, a lot of layers because, yes, I completely relate to, everything these kids are doing, what they're going through. That kind of was my childhood. We were constantly doing these crazy things, going to the scary house, messing around, getting in trouble, all those things we were doing. So climbing in trees and stuff. I mean, nowadays, I don't know if I've ever seen a child in a tree since I was in trees. You know what I'm saying? So these are things that I totally get because that's the stuff they used to do. And watching it though, I have to say that despite the fact that it's black and white, it seemed really crisp, man. I don't know if it was just what I was watching it on or something or what, but it didn't feel black and white. You know what I'm saying? It didn't feel stale or whatever. It actually felt just like a normal video. So just put that out there for anyone who's listening that is kind of worried about, watching it being on black and white and maybe not, feeling as engaged. Only the first couple moments when I was watching it did I realize that it's black and white, and then after that notion completely passed. The other thing I got to say is that this totally gave me Little Rascal vibes. I don't know if anyone is my age or older, you guys probably watched Little Rascals, and it was watching that. There were 2 entirely different movies going on. There was the a little bit of a comedy, and then a little bit of some real deep, serious plot lines going on. But the comic relief from these kids was really fantastic. It did take place mostly in the beginning of the film, but either way, it was still really, really, really charming, I would say. And the last thing I say is about Dill. I only found this out this morning, but apparently there's a lot of crazy stuff with regard to this book and the author. I did not even know this, but apparently the author was given a whole year's worth of salary in order to write a book. Harper Lee, she was given a year's salary by Michael Brown or something like that, and that's how she was able to actually write this book, as it was a Christmas gift or whatever. And one of her lifetime friends, which is, what's this guy's name? Oh, I have it right here. Truman Capote.
Truman Capote.
Her lifelong friend. I mean, I'm talking they became friends when they was really little, like the same age as what you see in Dill, because Truman is actually Dill.
Oh, really?
Yes. And what's interesting is that this is something that a lot of authors do. They'll actually use characters. They'll create characters in their stories that are actually images or facsimiles of people that they know in their real life. You know what I mean? So this is just another case of it. And honestly, I haven't really delved enough into Harper Lee's life, but I almost wonder how close Scout is to Harper Lee in her real life. You know, I really don't know, but I kind of just wonder. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that or whatever, but I thought that was kind of interesting though. And in fact, this guy actually outright said it at one point. I can't remember what the event was, but he actually said it. He's like, "Yeah, I'm Dill," from the story. So yeah,
they actually grew up a few houses down from each other. I think they're like 4 houses down. So, and the town's kind of based on their town, and the courthouse is based on the courthouse that was in their town.
Right,
so you're
right.
absolutely right on that.
Because her dad was a lawyer or something like that, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And he, in real life, Truman, was raised by his mom's relatives. He wasn't raised by it. So it's kind of interesting. Like there's a lot of parallels. That's why he's just like, yeah, that was me. So.
In fact, Harper Lee thought Gregory Peck looked so much like her father that she almost cried when she seen him because he had that same demeanor and look. And when her father passed, she gave Gregory Peck his watch, and he doesn't have it in the movie, but when he went to the Academy Awards afterwards, he has his actual watch with him during that.
Cool. Interesting. Yeah. I think that's everybody for this section. Tonight, unfortunately, I do not have any points to give out because I didn't come up with point questions, so we're a little different tonight than most nights. Sorry, everybody. But that's okay because the points wouldn't matter anyway because the points mean nothing. So, all right. So one night, Atticus overhears a poignant conversation between Jim and Scout. Scout asks Jim whether their deceased mother was pretty, if they love her, and if he misses her, as Scout has only 2 years old when she passed and therefore has no real memories of her. Then a local judge, Judge Taylor, approaches Atticus and informs him that the grand jury will soon charge Tom Robinson, a black man accused of raping a white woman. Judge Taylor asks Atticus if he would defend Tom in court, and Atticus, a deeply moral man, agrees to take the case. Time passes and summer ends. Scout begins school and fights with Walter Cunningham Jr. Scout attempted to explain why the poverty-stricken Walter could not afford lunch, but her teacher got sore with her, and Scout projects her frustration into innocent Walter. Jim stops the fight and apologizes for Scout's irrational behavior and invites Walter over for dinner. That's a lot to unpack in that whole section there. What I do have to say though is it is neat to see they kind of already established the whole Tom Robinson in this little interaction between the judge and Atticus, and then of course time just it's kind of like almost like an underscored scene, and then they jump right to the kids again. So I just like to know what your guys' thoughts are on discovering Atticus's assignment, as well as just the undertones, the social economical undertones that the kids go through in school. And I'll throw it over to you first, Tim.
This scene's super important. I mean, and it kind of parallels our Glory review that we did. This is the same as when in Glory, when the governor comes and asks Shaw if he wants to basically command a black regiment. Now, instead of this situation, now we have, Atticus, basically being asked by the judge, like, hey, I'm going to have to try this case. And it's a black man who has supposedly raped a white woman. And Atticus has to think about it for a minute because it has the same thing again. He knows, like, it's the right thing to do. And he's a pretty moral guy. But if he takes this case on, it's going to make him immensely unpopular with the town. These are not highly educated people that are still very, steadfast in, their feelings on the place of the black population. Segregation is still, in play here, and so on and so forth. So for him to take this, even though he's a very popular person with the town, everybody knows who he is. He's either related to them by blood or through marriage, to some degree. It's still going to make him immensely unpopular with the town, but he thinks about it for just a couple of seconds and says, look, I'll do it, because he's a very upstanding individual, and he's going to do the right thing. And he has to, from this decision forward, he has to justify it to his children on several occasions in subtle ways for them to understand, because he's like, people are going to say things in town about me and about this case, and you're going to have to deal with that and not rise to the taunts or the accusations that they're going to cast upon me or you, as being my children. So it's a huge moment, and it's a very pivotal to the story, obviously, that, this case is not part of the story. There's no story. This is really the center of it, even though most of it is from the children's perspective, at the beginning and towards the end. But it's pretty huge. And I think you see the kids. There's two different ways that the kids handle things. You've got Jim, who's older. So Jim deals with things a little better. He's a little bit more diplomatic, a little bit more compassionate, understanding. And then you got Scout, who's younger, and she's just, whatever comes into her head is going to come out of her mouth, however she feels about somebody or somebody's family or whatever somebody says to her, she's either going to say something or she's going to react to it. And there's, hands down, there's no middle ground with her, no governor on her when it comes to speaking what she feels is the truth. So, I thought that was interesting, but that's how a child would be most of the time. So which starts to develop an interesting dynamic between her and Atticus throughout the film that we don't get to really see with Jim.
Nice. I probably couldn't have said it better, honestly, because I definitely felt as though it was nice to see that it establishes Atticus's moral character. It shows that he is a guy who's going to stand up for anybody because he sees the right and the good in the situation. And I thought that was a great establishment. How about you, Courtney? What did you think of Atticus and that whole situation?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you and Tim. Definitely well said, Tim. But I think there was a lot to unpack. So going with Atticus and the judge talking about the case, it's true. He's very popular in that community, but with the segregation and everything, it wasn't going to be pretty. And we soon see how that's all going to transform. And of course, I'm not going to jump the gun, but it's kind of okay. What are we in for? What's the lesson that we're going to take with this guy? But it shows not only is he a moral character throughout, it's just I think that's why we all want to be Atticus, because he's just such a great guy. And not only from the moral perspective as a townsfolk, but as a father figure who is a single father, So I think there's a lot of lessons that you can learn from Atticus. And it definitely shows what he goes through in order to take the case. But it's like, at the same time, he's brave. He's like, I'm not going to run away from this. I'm going to take it. I'm going to defend this guy and see where this goes. So I think there's definitely a lot of lessons within that as far as Atticus is concerned. Dealing with the kids, what's interesting is, like what Tim was talking about between the differences between Jem and Scout. I definitely agree with that. And what's interesting is, considering that Scout is still a young girl and everything, I was thinking it from her perspective as well. So if you, not even in a mean-spirited way, if she's telling the teacher, hey, this is the reason why Walter can't do this or can't do that, and she gets in trouble for it, she is going to get mad at Walter. So it's actually, you're looking at it from a kid's perspective saying, okay, that's a natural reaction for her to have because she got in trouble without trying to be mean about the situation. But Jem, coming from the older sibling perspective, is like, hey, wait a minute, chillax. It's okay. You didn't get hurt or anything. It's like, calm down, girl.
And I also like how Jim kind of embraces Atticus's mental thought process in this and invites Walter over for dinner. He's like, look, we should set a good example. He's he's poor, so we should invite him over for dinner since he hasn't had much to eat lately. I think that was a real good shining point in Jim's character. How about you, Rick? What was your thoughts on this whole scene?
Such a good scene. A lot of good writing here. And before I even articulate, I just have to announce that you really don't see writing like this in cinema nowadays. I mean, you've got plot lines connected on multiple levels here in this short section. So, I mean, it's so endearing to get that scene. Totally unnecessary as far as the main plot line goes, but so endearing, and it just completely draws you in when you hear this little girl who doesn't have a mom that's asking, just longing to find out about her mom and stuff like that, and the effects that it has on her are apparent in the story too. It's not like she's some hollow character. She has some serious depth because she doesn't have a female role model, so she doesn't act, like a little girl probably would under normal situations. She's a tomboy, and she doesn't do a very good job keeping her emotions together, keeping her composure. That's why she lashes out and stuff like that. So that adds this very human aspect to the whole story. I mean, like every character is really being portrayed as a person, for better or for worse, and they try to at least to shine light on each of these characters, but obviously this main character, so you get a lot more depth. And I thought that it was a really, really good choice to ease into this really, I mean, this book came out in 1950s. It was written, 56 or something. Anyhow, this is some really heavy stuff for that time period. You know what I'm saying? So easing into it, you have to read page by page. You know what I'm saying? And for us watching it, we're like, this is like Little Rascals. These are a bunch of fun little kids and stuff like that. What is this about? You kind of get a little bit of taste about what's really happening behind the scenes, and then it just kind of goes to something else. Like, we'll deal with that later, and you just kind of continually get drawn into the story as each person goes through these different situations. I do have to add that I thought it was really funny when the little Cunningham boy pours like an immense amount of syrup. It just reminded me of the elf, with what's the guy's name, where he puts
Buddy?
Buddy.
Yeah.
He puts the syrup on his plate. Oh, I have some right here. Like, yeah. So that was really, really cool.
All right, I'm going to Mattpedia you here. To Kill a Mockingbird was originally published on July 11th, 1960. So,
all right, there we go.
And then the movie came out in 62. So it's merely 2 years later they made it into a movie. So, I'm going to step out of my normal questions here and kind of look at this from a social modern lens and say that it is really neat to see a movie where a female character is playing as a tomboy. With today's cinema, we would definitely be slapping labels and tags on this of a particular type of demographic. And I just think it's kind of neat to say, hey, look, this is a little girl. She wears boys' clothes while she's playing. She acts and plays like a tomboy, but she still identifies as a girl. And I just think that it's, again, I don't want to get political and everything like that. I think it's just kind of refreshing that we can actually see a character that takes on an aspect like that. We don't get certain letters jammed down our throat. And if I touch a nerve with anybody listening or anybody on the panel, I apologize. It's just that's my viewpoint. It's just neat to see something of that time.
All right, so you didn't touch a nerve, but I will have to say something, Matt. It was actually written in 1956. It wasn't published till later. The manuscript was delivered in spring of 1957.
Okay. All right. I won't meet you in the alleyway at high noon.
My goodness, it's a little tangent. I've been getting a lot of these Buster Scruggs shorts on my YouTube, and there's a lot of that going on. I've never seen it. I don't know if anyone else has, but it looks pretty interesting.
Nope, can't say that I have.
No one?
Sorry.
Okay. I was hoping to get a little help to see if it was any good, but the little clips have looked like they're pretty good. All right, sorry.
No problem. No problem. All right. So back to the film. So during dinner at the Finch household, Jim asks Walter if he has a gun of his own, and Walter says he does. Atticus then shares his own experiences with a gun as a young boy. He explains that his father allowed him to shoot and kill most birds, with the memorable exception of a mockingbird, a harmless songbird that only exists to offer music and giving pleasure to people. Meanwhile, Jim and Scout find 2 carved soap figures in a knothole at a tree at the edge of the Radley property. The figures resemble themselves, and later that night, Jim shows Scout a box containing marbles, the old pocket watch, the whistle, basically what we saw at the opening sequence of the film. I just want to point out first off, so I did notice at the beginning of the movie that Jim seems kind of at odds with his dad Atticus's character. Jim kind of wants a dad that's going to play football and let him go hunting and everything. But Atticus is like, no, I'm too old to play football. I'd hurt myself. I'll play tag football with you. No, I don't want you to have a gun just because, a boy of your age really shouldn't have a gun just yet. I mean, he's showing some wise choices. And I just think it's neat that Jim's kind of got this adverse reaction with his dad and his character. And then slowly we kind of see that change, especially after the sequence when, he's asking Walter about Walter's gun and hunting and that. And it kind of like opens Jim's eyes to say, oh, well, my dad had a gun. Okay. And so I just think that's kind of neat that we start laying that groundwork to kind of switch Jim's viewpoint of his dad. But over to you, Courtney. What did you think of the whole sequence of them finding the stuff in the tree hole and the dinner with Walter?
So what's actually interesting, starting with the dinner, first off, on a personal note, every time I watch that movie or that scene, it makes me hungry. Like, that food looks so incredible. And then when we were talking about Scout earlier, if you look at it, the woman that comes and cooks for the family and everything, she's actually basically the closest person to Scout as far as you need to be this way. Because when she scolds Walter for the syrup, she's the one, she's like, Scout, come here right now. And she yells at her. Now, granted, we still see Scout as a tomboy, but we don't see too much correction from anyone else other than Atticus, who I think he just kind of taps his fork there for a second, but then she continues on her tangent, and then the lady there is like, Scout, come here right now, we gotta talk. And if I'm not mistaken, she does spank her very lightly, I think. Mm-hmm. So as far as the woman is concerned, she's the only one in Scout's life that's kind of like, hey, you can't act this way. In fact, was she the one that encouraged her to wear the dress in the beginning when she was going to school?
I believe so.
Okay.
So
she would be the only one in Scout's life.
She was tugging at it.
Okay, yeah. So I think she would be the only one in Scout's life at that time period that would have said, hey, that's not ladylike. But I think... Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to say about that one. As far as the tree scene goes, it's actually amazing because I was talking about the scene with my dad very recently. We were talking about the scene where he's taking things out of the tree that Boo's leaving for the kids, and then later we see the dad come out with cement covering the hole up, and I said, this could be just me looking too much into it, but I think looking at it from that perspective, when the dad is covering that hole, I think he doesn't want his son to get hurt. So when he's seeing that Boo's leaving things for the kids, he doesn't want someone else to go, hey, there's this freak that's leaving things in the tree for the kids. We got to do something about this. So I think that's why the dad might be covering up that hole to prevent any more communication, so to speak, with Boo and the other kids. But I definitely think it's interesting because the kids then get a whole new perspective, because the entire time they're like, oh, this guy's weird, this guy's creepy, let's run under the porch and touch his house and run away. But when he starts leaving the toys, Jem has a different outlook on Boo, I think. And especially aside from that, the other scene that he brings up is when he runs away with the other kids, but then his pants gets caught on the fence. Well, when he goes back, he tells Scout later that night that they were folded. So we know that Boo was there, and he took that time to fold the pants and leave it out for Jem and then go back home. So I think that shows that Jem kind of matures mentally a little bit, thinking, okay, this guy, I don't think this guy is as creepy as we think he is, or as he's let out to be.
Gotcha. Well, how about you, Tim? What's your thoughts on this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things here, but I actually think it's funny. Courtney's like, that food looks fantastic, because I can't remember which actor it was, but it was either Mary Badham or Philip Alford that said after this filming was over, there was just certain foods, especially like eggs and bacon, that I just no longer could eat because I had to do those scenes over so many times. And it's not like today when you watch an actor and they're eating, you'll see them like grab the food and they'll put it up towards their mouth, and then they'll cut to somebody else while they're saying something, and then they're chewing, because they're never actually putting food in their mouth, because that stuff sits out forever, it spoils, bad. But they were actually eating this food, and they were just, and again, I can't remember which actor it was, but they're like, I just can't eat it anymore. I've eaten so much of it. We had to do take after take. I want none of this ever again. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But as far as the relationship of Scout and Calpurnia, yeah, I mean, she was the only female role model for sure that she had, and she resented Calpurnia, because Calpurnia really rode her hard. Because I mean, obviously, at this point, Jim's much older, so he's just not getting as much trouble, or he's far better at it. And again, she's like 6. She's just, I'm going to say what I want. I'm going to do what I want. When I don't think so, justice has been served, I'm going to tell you about it. So she's always after her. So they have a very tumultuous relationship at this point. They're by far not friends to some degree. She resents her for her always being on her and not after Scout as much, thinks that she doesn't like her as much, and things like that. And of course, Atticus always defends her. He's always like, you'll do what Calpurnia tells you to do, and you won't argue with her, and so on and so forth. So there is a bit of that going on. So she resents her to some degree, and I don't think probably comes to appreciate her until much later in life. And there's that relationship, I think, between Jem and his father, because Atticus he's more educated now. I mean, is he school educated? From my understanding, no. I think he was educated through, his father and his grandfather, and they were like self-educated men, and they kind of educated each other because school wasn't really in place yet, during that time. But, he's a fairly educated person. And so he's living a more docile life. He's not a farmer. I mean? He's got a job where he goes to an office, he's reading books, he's defending people. So he's not a field hand, is basically what it comes down to. In the South, that's a big deal. Like, when you're young, like, guns don't have the way we look at them today are not the way they looked at it then. It was nothing to give a young child a gun and teach them to hunt, because they were out working the fields. They were out doing the work. A lot of them, ended up not going to school a lot or at all, because they needed to be in the fields. They needed to learn to hunt so they could bring home food for the family. Somebody had to go out hunting. Sometimes it was the children. So, like, the children knew how to handle guns, even at a young age, and they understood how they worked. They weren't a danger to anybody. There wasn't all the craziness that we have today with it. And, people didn't look down on it. Like, so he's like, look, I'm in the 6th grade. I don't have a gun yet. This little kid that's in 1st grade with my sister has one. He's out hunting. He's furious about this. He's like, why can't I? And then he finds out later that not only that, but you've got, Atticus, who's like the best shot in the county. Like, they're like, didn't you know your dad's the best shot in the county? He's like, what the hell? Like, he's the best shot. He still won't take me out and get me a gun or anything like that. So he's really, it just chaps his hide as far as that goes. Like, he feels like he's not getting the same opportunities these other kids are. But on the flip side, he's getting to enjoy being a child, and he's getting to go to school full time. He doesn't understand, like, his station in life is so much better than these kids. These kids do this not because their parents trust them or want to, show them some kind of favor that he's not getting. They have to do all this out of necessity, and they have to work hard. They work hard. They come home, they work long days and nights. They come to school. They don't have shoes. They don't have, they have like one pair of clothes. They're dirty. He's not putting all that together. All he knows is, my dad won't let me have a gun. And this is aggravating the hell out of me, because I should have one at my age, and I don't understand why it's unfair. So there is a little bit of resentment there towards his father. So each kid has their own little battle that they're fighting throughout the film.
Gotcha. Well, before I slide this over to Rick real quick, I'm gonna back up, but then also kind of move forward a little bit in the storyline. Is it just me, or that whole sequence with the dog in the roadway kind of seemed like that dog was maybe like, I don't know, Michael Myers or Jason, because it was like the slowest moving mad dog. I mean, you see him like way off in the distance, slowly barking and slowly moving forward like a monster in a movie, to the point that they could call up Atticus and he could drive down there and then put the dog down in such a long... I mean, it's like 6 minutes before Atticus shows up to shoot the dog. And I just thought, man, this is one slow-moving mad dog. So.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if all mad animals like dash after people and attack them, or if sometimes they just do crazy, weird things like that dog was. I mean, he's just sitting in that road, just not acting right, you know? I mean, and that's a big thing back then. I mean, a lot of animals didn't get veterinary stuff. So, I mean, I imagine rabid animals were pretty commonplace. I mean, there's a lot of books. Old Yeller, if I remember, doesn't Old Yeller go bad or something at the end and stuff? I mean, you know, so like
bro.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a common occurrence back there. Like we really got money to put food on the table, let alone get our animals inoculated properly. So, but yeah, I don't know. You know, does every rabid animal just go after people like a fast zombie in 28 Days Later, or do they just show up and do weird, quirky things sometimes? You know, they're just foaming at the mouth and running around and just doing things that you look at it, well, that's not right. You know what I mean? I just don't know, but
they put on William Shatner masks and they slowly hobble down there with a knife in their teeth.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe there's two different. You know, there's the slow, like the Walking Dead zombies or mad dogs, and then there's the 28 Days Later, like we're gonna run after you like crazy ones. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends on which movie you're in.
All right, Rick. Well, how about you? What was your thoughts on Atticus and the kids?
Okay, so before I even say anything, that sequence where they, like Courtney had mentioned it a little bit, where they go at nighttime and go try to check out that house and stuff, that is just some awesome stuff, man. Like, again, nothing to do with the major plot line, but just so fun, just absolutely so fun. And honestly, if you cannot relate to something like that, you kind of miss something in your childhood, I think.
I'll have you know that I grew up invading Oldham.
So fun, so endearing. But I don't know if anyone mentioned it. If so, then I'll just skip it. But this, unless I'm mistaken, this was the scene when they're eating, when they actually talked about the whole why you don't kill mockingbirds.
Yes.
And again, going back to the whole thing, I mean, you got some foreshadowing here, about what's going on with the story. I mean, you just don't get this stuff anymore. I mean, I really don't know what the heck is going on. You just don't. I mean, depending on what media you're not cultivating, but engaging in, maybe you do, because there is media out there where we actually can get really good stories. But generally speaking, cinema nowadays, you do not get this kind of stuff, unfortunately. But anyhow, so you've got a little bit of foreshadowing going on, and then the whole thing with the dog. Honestly, look, my point of view, not everyone's going to agree with this. My point of view, Atticus was bullshitting his son. He said that he didn't get a gun until he was 13, but the way that he said it, okay, I'm just kind of reading between the lines here, but the way that he said it, it made it seem like the actor was trying to convey that he was acting like a liar in that moment. I really do believe that this was a lie, or at least an exaggeration to put off giving Jem a gun for his safety, honestly. I don't know. That's my take on it. I know maybe other people disagree. Maybe people thought that he was being 100% honest, and that would totally be within his character if he'd being honest and stuff like that. But I think at the very least he was stretching the truth a little bit at very least. All right. And
so he was being a dad. That's what you're saying.
I think so, okay? And as far as the dog goes, I thought that was really, really, really cool, especially with, I mean, it's really interesting given what Tim had said about the child actors on the filming of this. They showed some really good, I mean, Jem, I don't remember the actor's name, but the the actor playing the role of Jem really displayed some pretty sharp emotions with regard to, I mean, for a child, certainly. For watching the death of a dog, I mean, that's some serious stuff. I mean, I think that's part of the whole, going back to what Matt just said, being a dad, is that, he is a good shot. So I think he's just kind of trying to protect him from having to worry about killing. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know if anyone ever seen Harry Potter, but whenever you kill someone, it takes a bit of your soul and stuff like that. And, obviously if it was in cinema, then it's got to be true. It's on the internet, got to be true. So, but for real though, I think there is something to that, that when you do, even if it's not a human, but if you do take a life, it definitely should be meaningful, and it shouldn't be just something that is done for fun. And I think that's the message that he was trying to convey, especially when dissecting what he's talking about with regard to when you get a gun, you can kill some birds, but you don't kill mockingbirds and stuff like that. So I think there's something to that, and I like the scene because it kind of just shows Jem's character that there is something more than just having a gun. It's not a toy. It's like a real thing. You know what I'm saying? And there should be a rite of passage accompanied with a tool such as that.
Rick, I'm really glad that you joined us for this podcast, because I gotta say, I always like hearing your emotional input into films. You always bring in this little extra something, this emotional subtext to these scenes that it's always refreshing to hear that from you. And I know I'm not giving out any points tonight, but I do have to say I would give you a point for tying Harry Potter into Kill a Mockingbird. Very clever, very, very clever, sir.
Oh, what, I bring it 28 days later, I get nothing. He gets one for Harry Potter.
All right.
Damn, you are brutal.
28 days later, bro.
There's no points tonight. Okay, all right.
I really like that one, man. 28 days later.
Yes, that was clever. It was very clever, Tim. All right. Well, anyway, where was so now we move a little further down the road. So as another summer arrives, Dill Harris returns to Macomb, Alabama, and it is now Tom Robertson's trial, and it looms closer and closer. The racial tensions in Macomb begin to escalate. Atticus is hatefully ridiculed by the town, especially by Mr. Ewell, who calls him a N-word lover. One night, Atticus decides to stand guard outside the jail where Thomas is being held. A lynch mob comprised of Macomb's most racist and ignorant men surrounds the jail and demands that Atticus to move. Sensing the tension and the dangerous situation, Scout, Dill, and Jim run over to the mob. Atticus urges them to go home, but Scout and Jim defy him and decide to stay. Scout innocently engages into a candid yet alarming conversation with Walter Cunningham Sr., one of the men in the mob, who words embarrass the crowd, who soon dissipate and thereby prevent a potential lynching. Now, I have to say, this is definitely where Tim had mentioned that this 6-year-old girl is going to say anything on her mind. And I got to say, I think this whole scene kind of wraps up what tensions was going on in the South at this time. And I got to hand it to the writer and the author that this is definitely something that makes you think. Just the way that she was able to engage with the lynch crowd. And since Tim was the one that first brought up the 6-year-old and what she can say, why don't you tell us, Tim, a little bit about this sequence and what you thought about her dispersing the lynch mob?
Well, this scene is exactly how you expect it to go. They're in the South. There's a black man that has allegedly raped a white woman. Most townsfolk at that time, justice isn't going to be served in a courtroom. It's going to be served up by the populace. And, we're going to take care of that on our own. And we're going to go down and we're going to string that person up. And that's going to be the end of it. And then we won't have to worry about it anymore. And that's what they do. They'll get in their trucks and they come down there. Atticus gets wind of it. So he sits outside, brings a lamp, brings a book and a chair and sits outside that courthouse. And I originally thought, when he went to get that lamp, he was going to go get his gun because, you see Jim gets all perked up and looking. He's like, oh, and I think he thought he was going to see Atticus finally go grab a gun and head down there. But no, he grabs a lamp and a book and he goes down there, which, that's pretty I'm just going to say ballsy. I mean, like, he's going to sit down there and he knows what's coming. I mean, there's no doubt in his mind that this is going to happen tonight. And it does happen. And so the kids realize something's going on, and Jim alerts the other two. So they go running down there. Of course, we see all the townsfolk, they roll up on him and they're like, look, Atticus, you need to get out of the way. We're going to take care of this now. And he's like, no, you're not. You need to get back in your cars and go. And they're like, there ain't nothing you can say. This is happening and you're not going to stop it. And of course, the children, ram their way through the crowd and up there. And they're like, what's going on? Why is this happening? And Atticus is like, look, you kids need to go home. This is about to get all kinds of ugly. And I don't, he's without saying, he's like, worrying them. I don't want you to get hurt. And those kids, of course, this is one moment where the kids are like, no, we're not leaving. They're defying him over and over again, which is surprising because for the most part, Jim will, he will usually not do that. And he even defies, he's like, we're not leaving, and Dill stands with him, which is kind of surprising because you think he'd be kind of scared, but it's where the moment where Scout starts to talk, and it's out of the mouth of Babes right here. She's just like, hey, I know you, blah, blah, blah. I go to school with your kid, this, that, and the other. And these men that are about to do this lynching, they become ashamed because, instead of having Atticus talk to them in the way that he does, trying to reason with them, she's shaming them because she's like, look, you're our neighbors. We know you, and she doesn't really understand what's happening other than that they're mad and their dad's there to stop it. So, I mean, I don't know if the gravity of the situation is completely, an understanding of hers, but she's just like, oh, I go to school with your boys. We've had him at the house. We've done this. Like, remember when we talked that last time? And the guy's like, crap, like these are my neighbor and I'm about to bulldoze over him to go, basically render some street justice. And finally the shame overtakes him. And the rest of the men feel it, and he's just kind of like, come on, boys, let's go home. And they all capitulate. They all understand, like, look, we can't do this to this guy. This guy he has worked for us. He has done things for us when we didn't have anything to pay him. He's always been an upstanding individual. Like, we can't harm him or these children to get what we want, even though that we feel this is right, because what we're about to do to him is not right. So that part overtakes them more so than their need to render, country justice in this situation. So I think it's a huge pivotal moment. And I mean, it's really a marked moment for the movie. It's very powerful. And I still think at the end, I don't think Scout really understands what she managed to, stop from occurring by just trying to talk to this guy, is like, look, I know who you are. We talked before and stuff. So it's an interesting dynamic that I think is well directed and well written in this scene.
Yeah, very, very deep. I'm gonna back up just a little bit before I turn this back over to Courtney. So the scene where you talk about where he picks up the lamp and the bulb and the book and everything, I apparently have watched way too many James Bond movies, because for a split second I thought that maybe the lamp was like secretly a gun inside of it or something.
Right. So he's gonna pull out the stem and it's the barrel of the gun and stuff. He's been hiding it as a lamp all along. And yeah. I won't lie, Matt. The thought did crossed my mind for a minute. I'm like, is the lamp actually his gun? He's just been hiding it that way for years. Like, I turned my gun into a lamp. It doesn't work, kid. So you have no interest in it or whatever. And I think I feel that way because my uncle actually had a lamp that he had made out of an old shotgun or something that didn't work anymore. So, I'm right there with you. But it was an interesting concept nonetheless.
All right. Well, how about you, Courtney? What do you think of Scout's soliloquy and how she was able to diffuse the situation?
So I think we're going to end up saying this a lot when it comes to this movie, but the film is a well-made, well-written film. And I think there are things that you can look into and it could be accurate to what you're perceiving. So the first thing that came to mind was when Atticus comes and gets his things and he's like, okay, there's going to be a mob, I got to go and, basically protect Tom Robinson. The first thing that popped into my mind was two things. One, it's really sad that without the trial, without the court, everybody just naturally assumes this guy's guilty. There's no proof that he did do it, but we're going to go ahead and let's lynch this guy. So we got a whole bunch of people that set in their ways going, let's go ahead and take a life, even though he could not have done it. Meanwhile, we got Atticus going, okay, I got to go check this guy out because I'm going to defend him. And I think that speaks a lot about Atticus as a character, because if Atticus was doing it for the money, for the job, and he didn't care about Tom Robinson, I think he could have just overlooked it and went, well, we'll go ahead and let them do what they're going to do. But he doesn't. He puts himself into harm's way to protect this guy. And I think that shows the dynamic between Atticus and then the people who are set in their ways and are about to take a life when they have no proof. Then you got the kids who, again, they put themselves into harm's way when they see their father in danger. And I absolutely love this scene because those kids are so brave. And if I'm not mistaken, behind the scenes, the actress Mary Badham said that the guy that she kicks, I believe the guy actually had a wounded leg, like a stint or something. So they told her, do not kick that leg, you got to kick the other leg. And she ended up kicking that leg anyway, which, if I'm not mistaken, because of that, in that moment, you see the guy actually rubbing his leg when Atticus takes the kids onto the things. And that story just always stayed with me. I'm like, okay, Mary, I see what you did there. but it also shows, like, even when Atticus is trying to talk down the crowd and stuff and trying to get Jem and the kids home, what's interesting is Scout is almost looking at everybody to see, okay, who do I know here? Like, do I know everybody? Like, who is here? Like, she's scanning everybody. And then when she comes to eye contact with Walter's dad, she's like, wait a minute, hey, I know you. But what's interesting is when you see Walter's dad, it's almost identical to Walter. Both Walter and his father are both very shy, embarrassed people almost. Like, they're ashamed to live almost, but yet they are living. And what's interesting is the question popped into my mind was, okay, is he the type of guy that is going to be talked into going to a lynching rather than going out of his way to do it? But what's interesting is when Scout is able to talk him down and even talk the crowd down, it's Walter's dad that actually speaks up, is like, you know what, kid, you're all right. Let's go, everybody. It's a very powerful scene from everybody. And you even get a little bit of character development from Walter's dad. And it's very subtle, but it's a pretty powerful moment, I think.
Awesome. How about you, Rick? Anything else to add to Courtney's awesome description of that scene?
Honestly, both him and Courtney, I 100% agree. It was like spot on. The only thing I would maybe say is that something that Tim had said is, for me, I felt like it was very, very important. The fact that the kids rebuked Atticus's demands for them to leave. And it was mainly directed towards Jem because he was the oldest. And for me, this point in time, I thought that was a growing moment for Jem, and it became something that, like, I think Atticus kind of began to realize, like, you know what, he's not this little boy anymore, and then he's growing up, because there's a point later on in one of the last scenes that I'll talk about when we get there, but there's a point where, in one of the last scenes, I think there's a recognition that Atticus has towards Jem actually growing up, and it becomes something that further motivates Atticus to do what's right, opposed to doing what he may want to do. So, and taking the high ground, and that's basically what Jem is doing. And he's following in his dad's footsteps, I mean, Jem knows what's right and wrong at this point in his life, and he knows that it would be wrong for him to walk away at this moment, that he's got to stick to his principles and stuff like that. So I thought that was, like, really cool to see that. Yeah, I think that's it.
Gotcha. Well, I don't think I could add anything more about this scene than we've already said. So I'm going to go ahead and move on further down. So the next day is pretty much what we've been waiting for the entire movie. I mean, we get to see Atticus in his element, and it's the trial of Tom Robinson. And we start out, we see the majority of Maycomb's population visiting the courthouse to watch this explosive and dramatic trial. Atticus prohibits the children from attending the trial, but they go anyway. They run into the eldest Baptist minister, Reverend Sykes, and he allows the children to join the black audience up on the balcony of the courtroom. Again, I was watching this with my wife, and she's like, well, why are they going up there? I mean, it's got to be hot as Hades there. And I'm like, well, hon, remember, this is the 1930s. Segregation's going on. You notice that there are no black people in the main part of the level. All the colors are put up top, and all the white people are down below. So in order to get a seat, the kids got smart and, talked to the Baptist preacher. And so he brought them up there with them. And they could watch the whole courtroom, and you can see like all the spectators and everything. And it's just completely filled because this is like news making stuff that's happening on in the county. So everyone's going to turn up. And of course, this courtroom sequence pretty much comprises of 4 examinations. We look at the sheriff, we look at Mr. Ewell, we look at Mail, and then we also get to talk to Tom. And honestly, I think this is a scene that you have to watch in any grade class that you're learning about history, or you're learning about English writing, or just social economics class. You need to see this scene because this boils down to all the issues that you have in the South at this time in history. And we get this really neat breakdown of what happened that night. And of course, Tate reveals that nobody called the doctor on the night of Mail's beating and rape, and that Mail was severely beaten. We learned that she was beaten mostly on the right side of her body. We get Mr. Ewell's testimony that he came home, ran home right away, ran up to Mail, ran after the sheriff to get him, ran everywhere, and of course, Atticus points out several flaws in Mr. Ewell's testimony, and then he also asked Mr. Ewell to write his name on a piece of paper, and we learn that he's left-handed, which comes in a little later. So right now, I just kind of want to turn it over to you guys. What did you think of the overall trial sequence? And I'll throw it over to you first, Rick. What would you think of Atticus's breakdown of all the different?
Honestly, it gave me some serious Perry Mason or Columbo vibes and stuff when I'm watching this. It's like, I mean, it was clever, you know what I'm saying? Like how he was trying to, link one piece of evidence to another, but it wasn't so clever to where, I think most members of the audience viewing it would be able to follow. Like, totally, that makes sense. And it was done in such a way that where you figured it out before they said it, but they still said it. So you're kind of like, oh yeah, I totally got that, So I thought that was really a fun aspect to the discovery in the trial. However, while that may be something interesting and, fun, there's some serious deep issues going on here. And in fact, watching the whole thing, I am just reminded of the story of Emmett Till, which is a very serious, real story that happened in the same time frame. I believe it happened in 50 something, where if you're unfamiliar with the story, real quick rundown of what happened. This dude, Emmett Till, I think it was 13 or 14 or 15 or something like that, African-American, grew up in Chicagoland area, and he went to, I think it was Mississippi or something like that, somewhere down south Alabama, to visit his relative's cousin or something like that. And his mom told him before he went down, hey, you got to be careful down there. It's different down there. Mind your manners and this and that. Well, one thing led to another. He's hanging out in front of I think it was a convenience store or something like that. And supposedly, he whistled at a girl or something along those lines. Well, because of that, the girl accused him of grabbing her and saying, hey, baby, let's go on a date or something like that. Told her boyfriend this, and then the boyfriend and his friends dragged him out of the house and, did all manner of things that I don't want to say on this podcast that were just absolutely awful. And the mom, he died, and the mom afterwards allowed the press to put the images of his corpse in the newspapers, and it made national headlines, and people could more than hear about what was going on in the South, in Jim Crow South, but see it. And and one last little tidbit about the story. I think it was like 2008 or something like that. Right before this lady died, the one who claimed that Emmett Till did these things, she supposedly confessed that it was totally fabricated, 100% a lie. And in fact, the people who were there, Emmett Till's cousins and stuff, they all said none of that happened, And of course, no trial, no nothing. So it totally gave me these, vibes of really what was going on in the South, what kind of quote unquote justice was happening in the South. And at the end of the court case, you kind of get an idea of how justice is dealt with in the South during this time period of American history. So, a little bit interesting, a little bit sour. And when, what's her name? Mayella? When Mayella took the stand, I thought that it was, interesting. It was pretty clear that she was, in even her own testimony, feigning helplessness to curry the attention of Tom Robinson before even Tom Robinson was put on the stand. So, but that was just a little extra thing. That's what I got.
Right. All right. How about you, Tim? What did you think of the court sequence?
There's a lot to unpack here. This is the first time that we see this movie from the perspective of the adults and not the children. They're there, but they're actually bystanders. So this is the only segment that we will see that's truly just involves the adults of the story. And we're going to watch Atticus pretty much give the defense of a lifetime here. I mean, he's going to, by today's standards, if we sat in that courtroom, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that this man was innocent. But with that being said, this is the 1930s. This is down south. It wasn't going to matter how much proof he threw down on that floor. He was going to be guilty at the end of this. I mean, it's just what it is. I mean, and there's things that give this away. I mean, when you see Mayella Ewell go up and, they swear her in, the first thing is, if you watch real close, she never puts her hand on the Bible. It hovers just above it because she knows she's about ready to just lie. One, because she doesn't want to look bad in front of the town. Two, it's obvious her dad's beating her, and she does not want to incur the wrath of this man after the trial. So she is going to lie. So you've got her, on the stand. He's questioning her. He breaks it down. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, he's proven beyond the shadow of doubt that she has set this man up. But at the end, when she realizes that he's cornered her, he's like, no man with fancy talk's going to get me. And she just has a meltdown. And then she's like, that's all I'm going to say. And she gets up. Now, in any trial today, you'd be like, no, return to the stand. We're not done. But in that courtroom, he wasn't going to get any more questioning out of there. Everybody in that audience was like, she's done. You've pushed this girl too far. You will question her no more. So, I mean, you already can see the favor that, the audience, as well as the judge, as well as the, basically anybody in there, the jury is not going to let him push her. So, it's just bad. And then you got, when they put Tom Robinson on there, he's asking questions. And what's the thing that shows it the best? Well, here, catch this. Then catch it with the other arm. I can't because I got it and it's stuck in the cotton gin and it ripped it all up and the muscles don't work and stuff. And so, like he's proven that this guy doesn't, I mean, even though he's a big dude, maybe he could do something. He ain't got that kind of power because he only got one arm to work with, and I thought that the actor Brock Peters really helped that because he actually, the crying wasn't part of, the script or anything. He started doing that on his own during that trial. And Gregory Peck said, I couldn't even look at it. I had to look past him because otherwise I was going to break up too. So, that's a really powerful scene. Again, I think it goes along with Denzel Washington with the tear that comes down his eye during Glory. I mean, it's just got that same power to it. And then you got Gregory Peck. I mean, let's face it, this guy's going to give the summation of a lifetime. I mean, that summation is like 6 minutes long. I mean, and he just lays it all out. And to that guy's credit, from my understanding, Gregory Peck did that whole summation, one take. That's it. They never filmed it again. He did that whole thing in one take. So, that is super impressive. I mean, to do it, not only to memorize all that, but to do it that much passion and that perfectly. I mean, you get to the end of that, you're like, there's no doubt in my mind, like, this guy is not guilty. But no matter what he said, as well as he said, Tom Robinson's never getting off. He's just not, and you even see it somewhat in just the way some of these people sit. Like, if you look at the other lawyer, he's kicked back in his seat with his leg over the chair. You got the father that's just kind of sitting there sneering at him, things like that. Does that little shoulder bump and things like that. This case is just going to go against Atticus no matter what. Man, does he give it the college try. But unfortunately, we all know at the end of this, Tom Robinson's going to be guilty, and it's a damn shame, and then what do we see at the end of that when they come back and they, do the verdict and everybody leaves? All the black people stay upstairs and they're like, rise, your dad's about ready to leave. And that's their way of saying, thank you for trying, thank you for standing up for us and doing what you could. Like, it's a sign of respect across the entire black community that this man stood up for us and did the right thing. Even though he didn't win, he did the right thing, And of course, he's going to try more because he tell, Tom Robinson, look, we got a good chance for a good appeal. So just don't get down. Don't let this get to you. We still got other avenues.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a very moving sequence, the whole trial, all the way up to the end of the trial and the verdict. And, watching it, you get the idea that according to law, you are tried by a jury of your peers. And looking at it down south, he didn't have a jury of his peers. No. They were all clearly, white Anglo-Saxon farmers. You already know that what their verdict is going to be just when they first opened up the sequence.
Yeah, it's guilty till proven guilty.
Yeah.
There's all men on that jury too.
Yeah.
How about you, Courtney? You want to bring it all the way around? Let us know what you thought of the whole trial sequence and how much your mom loved Gregory Peck's 6-minute summation. Because there was some acting there. That was some solid acting.
Yeah, so I love that you brought my mom back up. Thank you. But it brought back that memory when I first watched it with her. I distinctly remember she said, whether you liked the character or whether you didn't like a character, she said every actor acted their butts off. They all did an incredible job. Then you got me, who's watching it for the first time. And I remember watching Gregory's character and just, him going, okay, this proves he didn't do it. This proves he didn't do it. The glass and the muscles and stuff. I was actually getting excited because I had not read the book at that time. So I didn't know where this was going to go. So I was getting all excited. I was going, yes, Atticus, go Atticus. And I looked at my mom. I said, so do they win? And she looked at me. She went, I said, what? I was so angry. I think my face actually turned bright red. I'm pretty sure that's how angry I got. And I actually was thinking about this just as we're talking about this, about Mayall's character. I did not like her character at all. And obviously we know why. But looking at it as I'm now 30 years old, I'm now older, there's one thing that pops into my mind, and that is with all the racism in the South at that time and everything, Tom was still doing chores for this girl, and she was allowing him at the house. So part of me's thinking that maybe she was one of those people that possibly was not quote unquote racist, I think, because she was allowing him to do things at the house. And that particular night, she actually invited him into the house. So part of me is like, okay, there was some connection between those two, I believe. And then I think whenever she made advances towards him and he clearly refused, she got upset. Now, obviously, we also know she's in an abusive relationship with her father. So with everything being said, here you got this innocent man ready to help a neighbor out. You took advantage of him. Now you're going to try and kill him, pretty much is what you're going to do, because everybody knows what you're going to do to this guy. So, and then looking at it, when she goes into that court, the sad thing is we know that he's innocent and she lies. And the sad thing is, looking at it, what would have happened if she would have just said he didn't do it? It's my dad. The sad thing is, looking at it, if you would have done it the way the film projected and the way you could have gone with it, she is still in a bad relationship, because whether you put your blame on Tom or not, you're still going to get beaten by your dad. The other thing is, if you would have been honest with it, he probably would have beaten you to death. So either way you look at it, she was not going to escape that life unless she would have ran off. Because I don't think anyone would have stuck up for her at that time period, because everybody in that small town knew each other, I think, and just minded their own business. So it's sad because she herself was trapped, but it's really heartbreaking when she uses the sweetness and kindness of this guy who happens to be black and just doesn't care of the outcome of his life and just, doesn't end up telling the truth at the end of it. And I gotta say too, the dad, I can't remember who the actor's name is, but the guy that plays her father, he is a piece of work. Even in the beginning when he, is talking to Gregory Peck, I'm just like, this guy's scum. I don't like this guy, like, at all.
Actually, the actor who plays him was a method actor, and he begged them for that role. And he's like, I know who this guy is. And so he kept himself from everybody else on the production. And, like, he became this person for the entire production. In fact, there was one point where Gregory Peck kind of gave him a suggestion of how he should do something, and he looked at him and said, "You don't tell me shit." Like, he just became that guy. So, yeah, he completely immersed himself. So everybody else was very just steer clear of him. They wanted nothing to do with him because they were very disturbed by his whole persona, because he became basically Bob Ewell. So,
man, I stay in character until I get to the DVD commentary.
Right. 50 years later.
Yeah. There is one other thing I wanted to agree with Tim on, and the point that he made is that I did notice that when she went to go put her hand on the Bible, you can clearly see that she's not putting her hand on the Bible. So yeah, I did catch that. But yeah, so unfortunately, yeah, it was a very moving sequence. I gotta say, this is like I said earlier, this is definitely the scene that you want to show anybody who's learning anything for law, for history. I mean, this is what the book is about, that whole sequence there. And it's a shame what happens afterwards. And of course, we find out after the loss that, Atticus is back home. And that night, Tate informs Atticus that Tom supposedly tried to escape jail and was shot to death by the authority. Atticus is then accompanied by Jim to go to the Robinson house to deliver the news to Mrs. Ewell, and or not Mrs. Ewell, but Mrs. Robinson. Hey, Mrs. Robinson. Okay. And then Mr. Ewell shows up and confronts Atticus in Robinson's yard, and then spits in his face. And of course, Atticus, he plays it cool. He like turns into a little Sam Jackson right there, and just kind of like just stands there and just like wipes the spit off his face and just stares at Mr. Ewell, and then gets in his car and leaves. So my question to the panel is, do you think Tom really did try to escape, or are we looking at another quote-unquote escape like in the Shawshank Redemption? And I'm going to throw it over to you first, Rick. Did Robinson really try to escape?
What's interesting is that when I was watching this, I really was trying to read what the actor was trying to convey at the time when he responded to being given the information that Tom, quote-unquote, ran away. And it appeared as though, if I remember correctly, the words were somewhere along the lines of, I told him to don't get emotional or worked up or something like that. So honestly, I think that particular scene was, for me, pretty eye-opening, that despite the fact that Atticus has a clear moral compass and he wants to do what's right, even he cannot escape the time that he lives in and what and how he grew up, because even his own biases are being shown. He can't even fathom the fact that this dude was murdered. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they straight up, there's no way that this guy would have done such a thing. Tom Robinson character would not have tried to run away in that circumstance. So from my opinion, I could be wrong and you guys could disagree, but in my opinion, it seemed pretty clear that it was a way to show the audience that even though people are trying to fight against immoral decisions in the South at this time, that the people who are living in there, they sometimes can't even see the vile things that are happening around them. So that is my take on that. Also, I got to mention that with regard to the spitting in the face, this is the full circle back with regard to Jem's growing up. I think under normal circumstances, Atticus would not have allowed Jem to come with, going to give the information to the Robinson family. But because Atticus is seeing that Jem is actually growing up, he's no longer a little boy, he's becoming a young man, that he allowed him to come with. And as a result of him coming with, when Atticus was spat in the face by Mr. Yule, I think that he would have actually done something. I think that because of what happened to Tom, because of all that happened in the court case, and I think that he was really being pushed to the edge. And I think that he might have done something if not Jem had been in his view at the time. He was facing the car, and Jem was watching Atticus's every move. And I think that was just a moment of clarity for Atticus so that he can just, hold his chin high, keep a stiff upper lip, wipe the stuff off his face, and get into the car and not say a word. So, yeah.
Gotcha. How about you, Courtney? What was your thoughts on this whole sequence?
So I definitely blush. All right. So as far as Tom's unfortunate death, I actually never gave it too much thought. I literally just took it for face value that he could have escaped, and unfortunately he was killed. Although, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they say that they tried just to shoot just to stop, and then they missed and ultimately killed him?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I thought that was okay. So I do get it from where Rick is coming from, but at the same time, I also think it's possible because he was scared. So it could have been possible, maybe in a state of panic, he could have tried to leave. I don't know. I think that's more or less what you could perceive from that, but I definitely think that was interesting from Rick's point of view. As far as Mr. Yule spitting, I'll tell you what, this guy, like I said, he's a piece of work, because it's like you got what you wanted, and yet you're coming over here to taunt Tom's family, who had just lost their family member, and you go up and you're going to spit in Atticus' face. It's like, can you grow up? Oh, wait, I guess you can at this point. But anyway, but I think from Atticus' point of view, I do love it when he comes up in front of him. He doesn't have to say anything. This guy is, first off, he's bigger than Yule is. So he could take him out in any shot if he wanted to. But I think it was just a powerful moment where he did not have to say a thing, did not have to lift his finger other than wiping his face. I think it just shows what Atticus is as a person. But the other thing I do want to point out too is he lives by what he says, I believe, because when he tells Scout, you have to promise me not to fight. You cannot fight with anyone anymore. You have to be above that. He himself shows this in front of his son, but even without the kids being there, like whenever Yule confronts him when he takes the case and he's saying these things, he's like, you got children of your own. He just walks away from him, doesn't bother saying anything. He just leaves. And again, it just shows that Atticus is somebody that you can look up to as a moral being, because there's just a lot he does that is so right, even though as a person, I can tell you this right now, I'm going to be honest with y'all. When I first watched this and he spat on Atticus, I was thinking, I'll punch him in the face already. Come on, I'm rooting for you. But he doesn't do that. And you're like, okay, I love you for being moral, but could you please just take your fist to him just once, please?
Nice. All right, Tim. Well, what about you? What do you think of this whole sequence?
So I'm going to disagree a little bit with Rick on this one, because I'm going to put myself in Tom Robinson's shoes, and I just sat through that trial and had that guy defend me with what is probably the most ironclad defense possible, and I still got convicted. I know what the end of this is going to be, and it's not going to be good. It's either going to be a lynch mob, or I'm going to go to jail and something bad's going to happen to me, or I'm going to be, the sentencing is going to, probably put me, I don't know if rape would get you the death sentence back then. I'm thinking not, but bad things happen in prison all the time. So I think he rabbited. I think he's seen the first opportunity and he's like, I'm going to try to make a break for it because this justice system is anything but offering me justice, and it won't as long as I'm here. So now, as far as the sheriff's like, oh, I tried to wound him and I unfortunately, shot him. I can see that being down there like, oh, yeah, we tried to wound him, but unfortunately the bullet went astray and killed him. I think that was just one of those, let's save the state a little bit of money, just end this now, kind of thing. So I'm pretty sure that without them saying it, that was a purposeful kill shot. It's like, oh, well, look, he rabbited. We tried to, but, unfortunately we killed him. So that was the end of that. And then when Atticus goes to tell the widow what happened, I agree with Rick on this one. I don't know why you would take your child to this. I mean, being the son of a cop, like if and again, different times and everything, but there's no way my dad would have ever allowed me in this kind of heated environment to accompany him to such a situation. You know what I mean? It just wouldn't have happened. I mean, granted, way different times and things, but still, you're not going to do that. It's just, you're going to be like, no, you need to stay here. But I don't know if Atticus let him go because he thought that, Jim was just showing more maturity, or whether he just wanted the company. Like he might have just wanted the company and let him go, which I get that a little bit more. Like he's, really feeling down, and maybe having him in the car just to be with him might make him feel a little better. But it was a bad decision overall, because I feel like you're putting your child in danger a little bit because you got a town that's not happy with what you just did. And then you got Bob Ewell out there. That guy's emboldened now. Look what he just got away with. I not only got to frame a guy for the crimes that I'm committing, but nobody in this town is going to question me. You know what I mean? I can do whatever I want as long, it's not going to matter. And right now, this lawyer is not, in the hearts and minds of people in a good way. So but he's still intimidated by him, because when it's a one-on-one, it's kind of a bully situation. I'm really emboldened. I'm going to shoulder check you in the courtroom, and everybody's going to laugh and everything. There ain't much you can do about it. But you see that little bit of intimidation when he finally confronts Atticus on that driveway. He spits in his face, and Atticus kind of walks up, and you see him flinch a little bit. He's waiting for it. Now, Atticus, he's trying to be a better man. He's definitely a bit more of a pacifist. He doesn't believe in the violence and stuff. So he's not going to rise to it. And so he lets him get away with it, but he gives him that long pause, and I think they both understand, if I wanted to, I'd lay you out right now and there's nothing you could do about it, because you're just a weak, pathetic human being. And I agree, too, that there's maybe a bit of, if I'm going to preach this, I have to live it in front of my child now. You know what I mean? I can't be like that. And of course, it doesn't matter what transpires from, between them now, because it's going to be his word against Ewell's, because even though there's a whole family, basically, Tom Robinson's whole family's there, none of their testimony will matter. So this guy may be able to turn this into like, oh, well, he didn't like that he lost the case and then he beat me kind of situation. So there's probably a little thought process in there too. The only thing I have problems with this scene going forward that leads us into the ending is that I think it's uncharacteristic to how the ending goes, because spitting in his face and then there being no more confrontation, no more threats to his family or anything like that really kind of like tears apart the ending, which I don't want to get into, until you're ready. But I just think when we get there, I'll kind of expand on that idea. But the ending gets it just doesn't seem to follow suit with what we're seeing here.
Gotcha. I kind of felt the same way about the ending, and I'll get to that when we get there. But yeah, I do like the fact that Atticus maintains his high moral character and he doesn't, lay out Mr. Yu. And again, I still don't understand the motivation of him showing up at the Robinsons' house to pick a fight with Atticus. Because technically he won the trial case. You would think that he'd, go drink one somewhere. But, he shows up to pick that fight. And it's the motivation of the character I didn't quite understand.
It's a deep-seated hate. That's all it is, plain and simple.
Yeah.
Deep-seated hate.
But, so Mr. Yu eventually does get his comeuppance, though, because we're now into October, and Mr. Yu gets revenge on Atticus in the coming scene where Jim and Scout are walking home from a Halloween pageant at their school. And I have to say it was rather clever that Scout was wearing a ham costume. When I first saw that, I was like, what are they carrying? That looks like a giant Liberty Bell. And then I seen that it's actually got the word ham stamped on it. And I go, that's kind of clever. So of course, they're walking home from the pageant, and Scout, like my daughter, left her dress somewhere, left her shoes somewhere. And now she has to wear this costume home. And as I'm watching this with my wife, my wife's like, yeah, that's going to be our daughter. She's going to be walking home, in the dark with a ham costume on.
I think that's every one of our kids, dude. Every one of them.
Yeah. So Mr. Yule, the kids hear this noise in the background, and of course we later find out that it's Mr. Yule following the children home, and he suddenly attacks the kids, and we don't see his face because we're seeing a lot of this from Scout's kind of viewpoint. We see her brother kind of get manhandled and get thrown to the side, and then we see Mr. Yule's hands as he's trying to manhandle this ham. And then, of course, they're suddenly rescued by this new character that we haven't seen yet. And again, it's from Scout's point of view. So all we see are hands grasping and shadows and thumps and bangs. And eventually it's all done. And Scout manages to get out from underneath her ham costume. And she sees a tall gentleman carrying her brother away, running all the way home. So of course she takes chase and winds up showing up, and her dad comes out of the house and scoops her up, and she kind of explains everything. And I have to say that Atticus does exactly what he had asked the father of Mael. Is he immediately calls the doctor, he immediately calls the sheriff, and we get this whole explanation in the house of what's going on and what had happened. And I just thought it was interesting that while all this is going on, nobody knows where this new character's at. Nobody knows where this tall gentleman is at. And it's not until it's revealed by Scout in the room that the guy was standing behind the door of Jim's bedroom. And I'm like, if you're the dad and you come in and you see your son's laying on the couch or laying on the bed unconscious, aren't you going to look around a little bit, try to figure out what's going on? How did he miraculously get there? But it isn't until Scout discovers Boo Radley, and who is played by, and I was shocked and surprised to see this, that it was Robert Duvall. And if you guys go back and watch or listen to our Apocalypse Now commentary, I had mentioned it was weird seeing Robert Duvall with hair, because everything I see him in, he's an old man. Seeing him here, his hair is receding. So I'm like, did he ever have a full head of hair? It was just really kind of weird. So I'm gonna go ahead and open the panel up to everyone. So what did you think of this whole end sequence and the whole reveal of Boo Radley, the fight, everything leading up to this end? And I know Tim was kind of biting his tongue on some comments that he had. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to you first, Tim.
Okay, so this is where I think it falls apart a little bit, because had we seen Bob Ewell being like, look, I'm going to get you and your family because you went against your own, by defending this guy, that's the mentality I would think. But he never does that. He just shows his disdain for Atticus. He never really threatens his family or anything. He's already won. He looks good in the eyes of the community. It makes no sense for him to go after his kids, except for this just deep-seated hate he has. But I think if we were going to really drill down to the core of that character would have threatened him and his family. He'd have been like, look, you went against your own defending this guy, this, that, and the other, and I'm going to make you pay, at some point, you're going to wish you'd never done this. But there is no statement. There's just that spit in the face, reserved for a Bob Ewell kind of character kind of thing. So I think it just doesn't hold true, and it seems weird, and then he waits months to do it kind of thing, and he's stalking these kids, so it's a weird ending as far as that goes, and the same thing with, apparently now we've got Boo Radley, who's apparently stalking the children too off and on, although we kind of get that. And I think going back to the tree thing, I think that was a lost opportunity in this movie because, from what little I read in the book and remember, there's a lot more that transpires with that knot hole in the tree where things are, going back and forth between Boo and the children. So I don't think they really cover that adequately enough to establish this kind of like Boo's in some kind of weird communication with the kids. It's lightly, you kind of get a feeling for it a little bit, but you don't really fully understand it. I think it's much in the book. So I wish they'd fleshed that out a little bit more, that there's something between Boo and the kids other than them just being scared and hitting the house and things like that. But it's just not established enough in my mind. But apparently he's keeping an eye out for the kids. But once the attack happens and we see it, I do like the idea that, again, we see it from Scout's perspective from inside the giant ham, so she's just kind of looking through, can only see so much and things like that. And then we see the big hands fighting back and forth and stuff. It was an interesting choice as far as the way that they filmed it and stuff. And I thought that was well done. And again, I agree. It's weird that you get all the way, somebody carries, Jem all the way back, puts him in the bed. He does call the cops right away and stuff, but he doesn't really look over the house. And I guess maybe is that a difference between the 30s when things like that didn't happen and now when we're like completely paranoid and we lock our doors, 7 ways from Sunday to make sure nobody can get in kind of thing. And then we finally get to see Boo Radley, who, again, as you point out, Robert Duvall, first time on film, pretty interesting, blonde-haired. For what hair he had, as you pointed out, Matt, he dyed his hair blonde for this and looks very albino-like, which I guess is kind of how they suggest a little bit maybe why he's going out at night and things like that, because he's very pale, maybe the sunlight supposedly hurts his eyes, things like that. So very quiet, never says a word at all, So this guy's been traumatized. He's got some weird things going on with him, but he's infatuated with these children. He's, there's been some kind of weird relationship with him and the kids, even though they never actually met. They've just kind of had this weird pseudo, like, I'll leave things for you as your friend kind of thing. But, them kind of being scared of him and trying to get him to come out and things like that. So he obviously has some infatuation with these kids and feels a sense of need to protect them or, just make sure that bad things don't befall them. Same thing with the pants. When he gets caught underneath, he folds them up, puts them back on the thing. Weird stuff like that. So that's kind of loosely established. I think it goes much further in the book. But the end of this book it seems like if they'd added another 20 minutes worth of filming, and maybe it was there and they cut it for time because it is an over 2-hour movie, it just might have fleshed out the ending a little bit better. But I thought it was just kind of weak and weird and didn't really make sense in the grand scheme of the whole film.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, how about you, Rick? What did you think of this whole end sequence, the showdown and then the reveal of Boo Radley?
I didn't think it was actually that bad. I think part of the choices, I mean, it very well may be, like Tim said, that it was already long and they're just trying to cut to make time and stuff. But in the end, I thought that it was fine because it was just really heavy climax and rising action. I mean, super heavy. So to have like a lighthearted ending, I think just kind of makes it a little bit more digestible, and then you can walk away, even though you just saw some things that perhaps people who like when this thing first came out, when the first came out and the movie first came out, I'm sure people watched this and they're like, what the heck? But at the end, it just kind of like allows you to be able to like, well, here's these other things, and I'm going to be okay with this the rest of the day and not really be letting it linger too heavy on my heart. But I will say that, that the ending for me just kind of reminded me of a mix between like Wizard of Oz and Scooby-Doo, and it just had this like, it really was pretty lighthearted, especially on the heels of that really heavy stuff. It may have been intentional, you know what I mean? but it did have the a little bit of a happy-go-lucky, happy ending kind of sort of thing going on, and the aspects of the ham did kind of make a little bit more sense with regard to why that Abu wasn't going to be prosecuted, because they didn't actually have any witnesses to the crime. You know what I mean? I mean, what's her name was in that ham, and Jem was knocked out, so there were no witnesses to be like, well, actually, this is what happened. I saw it happen. The whole thing happened. So they were allowed, or rather, they were afforded the opportunity to turn a blind eye to the crime that it had just happened, despite that it was justice. And the other thing too is with regard to the theme, I think that this right here kind of did show the theme. Obviously, probably a number of aspects of theme here in this story, but one of them was, for me, is that justice doesn't always happen in the courtroom, and that sometimes it can't happen in the courtroom. So, and I think this right here would probably reinforce that, because it would be justice for Bob Ewell to perish and the perpetrator of that crime to really not be punished, because it was a service for the community. That was justice. So
Right. I can see that theme. It's definitely a subtext in the ending there. One thing I also just want to point out is that Atticus, if you notice, he was kind of a little shaken up, and he was thinking, okay, how old is my son? Because at first he was thinking that Jim had killed UL in self-defense, and then of course the sheriff's like, no, he couldn't have. He was passed out. And I just, again, part of that subtext that, oh, hey, there is this Southern justice that does take place. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. But then now I'm going to turn it over to Courtney. So Courtney, here we are. We've watched To Kill a Mockingbird. This is the end of the movie. Tell us your thought on the whole end of with Boo Radley.
So this movie has a lot of tense moments, but I think this moment here really brings out the suspense and violence, if you will, because the closest we got to an actual violent scene in this movie, other than dialogue, is the attempted lynch mob, but nothing happens. So when they come out of the school and she's in the ham and stuff, you're given that false sense of security. Even the music is like, oh, this is a happy time. But then the minute they start walking in the woods, the music changes into like that harmonica type sound, and it's not a very happy sound. And then you hear and see Jem looking around like, okay, there's something wrong. And I think it's because we've been on the edge a lot within this movie. This here is where we get punched because there are kids involved. And once Jem gets, beaten up and stuff, you're on the edge of your seat. Like, what's going to happen? Who's going to rescue these kids? Are these kids going to make it out, okay? And when we see Boo come in and finally save the kids, it's like, okay, thank God. And then it is a moment where we hear Yule had died. You don't feel sad about it, because it's like, okay, this guy literally just tried to kill these kids. I think that's what the intention was. And I do want to point out that even though it was very subtle, it's a quick line, I think that moment where Yule does tell Atticus early in the film, what kind of man are you? You got children of your own. I think that little subtle hint was enough for us to go, this guy could be dangerous. And I think that is enough in a way to show us, no, this guy could hurt this guy's kids. And other than that, it's just the pure hatred that we do buy, that this guy would go out and harm these kids. He has no problem harming his own. And the fact that he can't stand Atticus's guts because he defends a black man, it's not that far of a stretch for us to believe, no, this guy would definitely harm these kids. At least that's what I would think in my perspective. But no, when Boo comes in and everything, that whole sequence is just crazy. And then another little subtle moment that I actually find heartbreaking and sweet at the same time is when Boo takes Jem home and Scout runs towards her dad and he cries out her name. his cries out for her and then her jumping into his arms and whimpering, that was all greatly acted, I think, from both of them. They both had really amazing chemistry, and you truly believe that they were father and daughter. As far as Boo putting Jem in the house, I never really thought too much about it, but I'd like to think that possibly Atticus knew he was in the house, but his mind was too focused on, okay, Scout's safe, Jem's here, now I gotta call the cops, because the only one that really was surprised other than Scout was the cop. Because Atticus, yeah, he looks over, but he's the one that makes the introduction. So my mentality was he probably already knew he was there, but he knew he was, just this quiet individual. So he's like, well, he's just back there hiding somewhere. He didn't really bring it to attention until Scout brought up his name. But another personal note with this scene was this was the scene that made me cry, when it's just no dialogue, when that door opens and Boo just freaks out into the corner, but then his face softens towards Scout and that music swells. I bawled my eyes out, and I thought Robert Duvall had no line of dialogue, and his facial expression was powerful, and I just love that moment. It still makes me cry to this day.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, that pretty much wraps up the movie. So, Courtney, guys, this then leads us to our death clock. And this movie is 2 hours and 9 minutes. Do you feel as though it is worth taking the 2 hours and 9 minutes off your death clock to watch this film? I'll turn it over to you first, Courtney. What do you think?
Absolutely. I have no regrets watching this movie. I'm so glad my mom talked me into watching it. It's one that's got powerful lessons, great acting, great characters for the most part, and it's great. It's a great discussion whether or not you could see it from one perspective or another. And even if you would say, how would I maybe change certain things if you were the filmmaker? But there's a lot to explore with this film. There's a lot of happiness. There's a lot of sadness. But it's definitely up there in my top 10 easily, and it should be watched. Absolutely.
Rick, how about you? Is it worth taking time off your death clock?
For sure, absolutely. It's a great story. It's got great writing, awesome character development. It's emotional. It's powerful. It's historically relevant. There's no reason not to. Definitely watch it.
All right, Tim.
So this is a classic movie based off of a classic book. It's a movie that speaks to the times of the 30s, something that so many of us are not familiar with, especially Southern or rural 30s. In that respect, it's a great film that portrays that, which we don't get in a lot of other films. But I think that there's been so many films based on this period, based on racism, based on segregation, things like that have been so much more powerful that I've seen now. I felt this movie was very predictable. Like there were no twist, turn, surprises for me or anything like that in this film at all. I knew in the end he was going to be found guilty, all that kind of stuff, and probably something bad was going to befall him. I feel there is some character development. I don't feel like it's deep character development though. I felt most of it was just pretty flat, and it was like, instead of like Joey always says, it was one of those, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens kind of thing. It was just, you could predict the whole film from one and the other. So I guess if you want to watch it because it's a classic, because you're familiar with the book, or it's a classic piece of literature, or you just want to know something about these times, yeah, you should probably go ahead and watch it. As far as like a powerful piece, I just don't think it's there. And is it something that I would probably watch again? No, never going to watch this film twice. I'm just not going to do it. So I say, unless you really want to watch it because it's a very classic piece of literature and you're interested in the movie, you should go see it. But otherwise, I say it's a hard pass. There's
Gotcha.
just better movies that deal with these kind of subjects. I'd say go watch Glory first. I think Glory's far more powerful, even though it's set in a different time period. Just for the messaging in it, it's a much more powerful movie.
Okay, well, I'm gonna
interject real quick.
Yeah,
sure,
absolutely.
Rick, go ahead.
So I am surprised at how much you like Glory, because I remember before we did the review on it, you were like, "Yeah, man, I never seen this," and I was like, "Yeah, dude, you're gonna like this."
Glory was a fantastic film. I mean, when I got to the end of that, it had such an emotional impact on me. It was such a powerful movie. It had such a great cast that portrayed, the strife of the Black people. I mean, and it was so uplifting, everything. And I don't feel like this movie just doesn't do that. For me, it doesn't have that. I mean, when I got done watching Glory, it brought a tear to my eye. It just was like, it was so freaking powerful. That's why, at the end of that one, I said, look, everybody should have to watch this film in school. Like, it's just that monumentally important. Like, I think it's so important that people understand that. And this movie just doesn't do it, so you were spot on. Yeah. Glory, phenomenal movie. Phenomenal. This
For those
one,
of you
important, but just not as powerful, cinematically.
Gotcha.
For those
Go
of
ahead.
you who are listening, if you want to hear more about Glory, go to the Middle Age Movie Reviews podcast, and you can check out Glory as one of their reviews. There's a plug for you guys.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, for my death clock, I'm actually going to go with the majority here, and I'm going to say that, yes, this movie is worth taking time off your death clock, with one slight caveat. I think you should watch it in a certain mindset. This movie definitely has a lot of hard subtext, a lot of dark and just kind of downbeat moments about society at the time. And I think when you go into this movie, you should at least keep that in mind when you're watching it, that this is set in a time when people were at their lowest. I mean, as a country, we were in a Great Depression. There was racism was rampant in the South down there at the time, and it's just, you have to be in that mindset to see that this is where we are at this time, and now look at where we're at today. You can definitely see a significant shift and change in everything in our social economics as well as in our lifestyles. So. But yes, I think it's definitely worth watching to take time off your death clock. All right, well, that leads us to mail call. And again, tonight, no mail, nothing to call out. So, folks, if you're interested in writing in, let us know what you think of the show. Let us know about what you think about having our wonderful guests on the show. Write to us. Let us know what you think. Just email us at mamreviewpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll read your email right here on the show. And, of course, with that said, all right, ladies and gentlemen, what else have you been watching other than To Kill a Mockingbird? And I'll throw it over to you first, Rick.
Oh, man, I've been waiting for this. Okay, so it's been a while since I've been on the podcast, and while I've been super duper busy, I was able to watch a couple things. So the first thing I want to talk about, and you guys know that I like good stories, and funny enough, I found anime to be a very good medium to consume good stories on. So I've got two. Today I'm going to talk about Shangri-La Frontier. It's a quirky anime, but it's so good. It's about the main character. He's this guy. He's probably like an older teenager, and he is a super duper expert at playing trash video games, and all these video games that he plays are VR video games, and he's like really good at playing these terrible video games. He'll go through and like 100% these video games despite all the bugs that it has and problems in the story and stuff like that. And then finally he's introduced to an actual like AAA title, and it is amazing. And you get into this game and this world, and it's like really in depth and stuff like that. And because he knows how to use the mechanics of a trashy game, he has an immense ability to maximize his potential in this really, really well-made video game. So Shangri-La Frontier, that one's on Netflix, and another one, I think it's on actually that one's on Crunchyroll. But another one, this one is on Netflix, and that is Parry Everything. This one, boy, man, this one is fun. However, the thing that really makes this one fun is the internal monologuing inside this one. So it's about this character who is like he thinks he's really not that good at as an adventurer, but he actually has developed the skill to be able to parry any attack. Any attack. It don't matter. He can straight up parry it. And because he doesn't have any attack skills, he's this like low rank adventurer. But in actuality, he's like one of the most powerful characters in the entire world. And the charm to it is that he's extremely humble about it. Like, you hear his thoughts because of the internal monologuing, and it's not just his. You hear other characters' internal monologues too. And it really gives you perspective on how it's just so funny because the way that he looks at things and the way that he gives excuses for different things that are happening around him and gives you the rationale for the decision he makes, it's just so good. It's absolutely, it's an actual breath of fresh air. Definitely check out Shangri-La Frontier and Piri Everything. And here's something for those of you who have been thinking about mailing, putting in a comment into the YouTube channel or something like that. Earlier today, on this podcast, I mentioned the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I've been seeing these clips on my YouTube. Should I watch it? Write down. If you've seen the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, write down. Give us your own little, review of whether or not we should watch it. Okay? And that's what I got for today.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Rick. Hopefully we get some comments.
There you go.
Looking forward to it. All right, Courtney, what are you watching?
Today, actually, I put on the newly released documentary, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. I heard it was coming out sometime this year, and I thought, not really a big fan of Christopher Reeve, but I knew who the guy was. He big for playing Superman, but he also played in Somewhere in Time from 1980, which, full disclosure, I personally feel like the 1980s was the last best decade for the greatest films, in my opinion. But I went ahead, gave it a watch, and there was a lot that I didn't know about him that I'm glad I did get to know about. His story is very interesting. If you like Superman, definitely recommend. My brother likes his version of Superman up until the recent guy who played in Man of Steel, since took over the mantle, I guess. But yeah, it's very informative. We hear a lot from his family members, including his kids. And oh my gosh, his kids are the spitting image of him, especially his sons. And it's enlightening and very interesting. And I definitely recommend it.
Awesome. It's actually on my to watch list. Hopefully I get a chance to watch it the next couple of days. All right, Tim, how about you? What are you watching?
So I am sadly into the second season of Tulsa King, which again I thoroughly recommend to anybody who's a fan of Sylvester Stallone, or again, basically 80s action movies brought over to our, to the the 2024. It's got that feel to it. It's a lot of fun. It's a pretty solid writing, pretty entertaining. And I also watched, I pulled up the 2016 film War Dogs, which I got one of my nephews actually brought this film to my attention, and I had never seen it before. But it's basically a film about a couple of guys who once back during the Iraq War, Dick Cheney did a lot of contracts with the the military-industrial complex, and they basically had no contest or no bid contracts, and he got in trouble for that. So they had to open it up, and now the government lists all these basically arms contracts that they need stuff for, and these guys figured out, like, look, if we don't want the big stuff. We just want the little crumbs, but we can make millions of dollars off it. So these two 20-somethings become arms dealers, and they start providing arms to the American government little by little, and they work their way into bigger and bigger contracts. And as they do that, they get further and further out of their depth, and it gets them into all kinds of trouble. So it's a pretty interesting show, and it stars Jonah Hill as is the big one you would know. He's just entertaining as hell in it. So I had never had this on my radar before, never even heard of this movie. It's well worth a watch. It's pretty entertaining. It's true to life on on how these contracts had worked and the way the government now has to bid them openly to everybody. So pretty interesting perspective into the world of, providing arms and munitions to our government and their allies. So fun movie for sure. Well worth the watch.
Yeah, there's like a really, really fun scene in there where he's like in the hood or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he pulls out a submachine gun. He's like, what? Where are you guys going?
Yeah. Start shooting. The guy's like, what are you doing? He goes, okay, I got a class 3 license. We're all good. Like, it's just, that's just every day, it's fine. If I get the level class 3, you can do whatever you want kind of thing. So yeah, it's Jonah Hill's character is just completely off the hook in this. And it's just living by the seat of his pants continuously, which makes it pretty entertaining. But how about you, Matt? What are you watching?
Well, I got 2 episodes into the new season of Ghosts on CBS, so I got caught up. I watched episodes 3 and episodes 4, and they kind of left episode 3 on a cliffhanger question of, are there more ghosts on the property that they don't know about? So it is a funny show. I really like it. I recommend it to anybody that likes just some classic humor. And obviously it's a transplant from Britain, kind of like The Office was. But yeah, it's really good, and I've really enjoyed it so far. And like I said, episode 3 and episode 4 of season 4 now is really funny.
Or were you sorry to see Patience go though?
Yeah, but I got a feeling that she'll probably be coming back.
I was actually happy to see her go. I did not think she was a value-added character.
It was an interesting episode where everyone thought that she turned the main character into a stone statue. I thought that was pretty funny.
That was a little entertaining. I will give you that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, Courtney, thank you for joining us this evening. Why don't you tell our listeners where we can hear more from you?
Thank you. So I have a YouTube channel called Classics with Courtney. You can find me there. You can also find me under Instagram and Facebook under the same name. And if you want to just check out some of my old Hollywood posts that have nothing to do with reviews, just me posting, you can follow me on 20s_60s Hollywood.
All right. Well, Rick, thank you for always joining us, and thank you for filling in our third chair this evening. Where can our listeners hear more of your video game reviews?
All right. Well, first, I got to say thanks for having me on. It's honestly, it's been a long time, I think, and it's always fun. And I think I kind of forgotten how much fun it is being on these, so appreciate that. And if you want to hear more from me, just know that I do video game reviews, not just reviews, but mostly tips and tricks, playthroughs, walkthroughs for Souls game and Souls likes. So I'm talking about games like Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Steel Rising, Fell Seal, Bloodborne, and tactics games like Tactics Ogre, Fell Seal. I'm probably actually going to be doing soon a little bit of a game, maybe review, a walk back to get this Final Fantasy 1 from the NES. So really old game. But anyhow, if you want to hear more, that's Dungeon Master Elite, no spaces, on YouTube, Dungeon Master Elite.
A really old game?
Man,
you're
NES.
talking about my childhood, man.
NES, bro. That was, honestly, with regard to the NES. And by the way, for those of you out there listening and you call the Super Nintendo Entertainment System the SNES, stop, okay? It is the SNES, okay? I cannot stand it when I hear people say that. It is the SNES, and yeah, for those who are old school gamers, you probably remember the Atari. Those were old games. I had Journey Escape. I still have it. Journey Escape. And in the game Journey Escape, the Kool-Aid Man came down from the top of the screen, bro. And then Journey started playing Don't Stop Believing.
What, you're going to leave out Intellivision and ColecoVision? What's wrong with you, man? Come on. Let's do the gambit.
What about Commodore 64, huh?
Hey, bro. Hey.
Yeah. Now you're just showing that you're a nerd.
Well, this is the middle-aged movie reviews, okay?
Hey.
We're all middle-aged.
That's
We're old.
right. That's right.
Yeah, but it doesn't say the middle-aged nerdy reviews. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening to the Middle-Aged Movie Reviews podcast. And we hope you've enjoyed listening to our take on To Kill a Mockingbird. And please, if you see Joey out there up in the tree, let him know that you're listening to the podcast and telling other people about it so that he'll come down out of the tree and join us once again.
Please like and subscribe to our show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podchaser. We have a goal of getting 50 subscribers by 2025, so please give us a hand and click on that subscribe button and get word out about our show. If you'd like to continue the conversation about movies, check out our Facebook group at Middle Age Movie Reviews Group on Facebook for interesting insights, questions, and movie-related posts. If you need to use... Oh, never mind that. We are a part of the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. Man, that is a mouthful.
And as always, thanks, stay cool, and bye everyone.